Lately, social media and big domain providers have been fucking people over. Google, Facebook, Twitter, the internet giants. Google was reorganized under a holding company called Alphabet Inc. in 2015, and that company now owns around 200 other companies. Facebook serves around 2 billion people. These companies are big. These sites have grown big because of network effects, but also because of capital concentration, and right now they have too much power on the web, owned by a small group of people who have the same ideology with possession of tons of different services. It's clear that something has to be done about this. Some naively call for nationalising these companies. Nationalise Twitter because it's a public platform. This is a garbage position. The real problem is that they got too big in terms of their ownership structure. If you nationalise them to US state ownership, what would ultimately happen is that they'd be just as tyrannical as before, only now there's no chance of them ever failing and being replaced by an alternative, and you are furthering direct government control of the internet. If you think that's a vehicle for enforcing the First Amendment, you're naive, and it would more than likely lead to its weakening. Social media networks are pressured by users to ban some things, such as spam, which would create a contradiction that would lead to social pressure against legal free speech in general, and bolster the living document interpretation of the Constitution. If someone says we should nationalise Twitter or YouTube, I'd agree only on the condition that we shut them down straight afterwards. The free market is a good thing, to the extent that it exists. But what is more important than a free market is a competitive market. I take a page out of the distributist book here, and say that instead of furthering the centralised control of the internet, we cut things down to size. I am, after all, a decentralist, if a gradualist and pragmatic one. The answer to control by a monopoly isn't control by benevolent monopoly. Instead, if we're going to bring in government intervention, then what should be done is not to nationalise these giant corporations, but to trust bust them. Bring anti-monopoly law into play, split up their holdings, weaken them, stir the pot a bit, and create a more competitive market field. Don't use the government to directly manage things and entangle itself with private society, but use the government as a tool to clear away the weeds. I think that's something the owners of a megacorporation like Google want even less than nationalisation. Because with state ownership, there's at least a way for them to manufacture the situation into a corporate state, which would backfire badly on us. Don't cement their power under supposedly benevolent guidance, which will only be corrupted the same way. Downsize their power and cut them to shreds. Another thing that's really going to help is reducing copyright law so they can't cooperate with big media companies to shut stuff down on false pretenses. There's also net neutrality, but in that case that's dealing with the ISPs, and that is very important for much the same reason. The ISPs essentially operate in an oligopolistic environment. Now, all of that involves actually doing things legally, politically, and we don't have that power at the moment. In the meantime, we need a survival strategy for controversial creators, and that strategy is to use alternative services. They are much, much smaller, and they don't have the reach or the resources, but they serve as good backups when your stuff gets taken off the bigger platforms. For example, as a replacement for YouTube, try things like BitChute or DTube. They're primitive right now, but they can grow. They use BitTorrent and blockchain technology respectively, cutting out the need for big servers that only a large corporation could afford. The owner of BitChute has been talking to the user Braving Ruin, aka Edgy Sphinx, on Twitter, and if he's not going to eject white nationalists off his platform, then he's not going to eject the rest of us. If you have a website run by one of the big corps, it can get shut down and put in a holding state when they decide that they want to virtue signal. That's what happened to Daily Stormer recently, and they've now moved to a deep web domain, which you can access with Tor using the Onion service. So there are ways for miscreants to escape being squashed entirely. Use these methods.